Hold up your right hand. If you can't tell what your right hand is, put your thumbs together. Your left thumb will point at your right hand. All right. You got your right hand up. Good. Now hold up your left thumb. Good. This is basically like when you get in the car, turn the key, and see all the lights come on. You know everything's working. That's really all I wanted to do there, was just to see if all the lights were on and everything's working. Now that's you are right. The lights may be on, but nobody's home. Okay, part of the reason I did that was years ago I was doing a teacher evaluation, and somebody said, "I like the interactive way you teach," and I said, "I don't understand the question." And he says, "You carry on conversations." And I said, "There's another way to teach." He said, "Yeah, some people just talk," and I'm going, "Nah, you're kidding me. Nobody does that." Nobody couldn't believe that there's anybody who just stands up and talks. So I got a conversation. That's why we started doing this. You may want a pencil paper for some of this that we're doing, unless you got a real good memory, because we've got basically 3 problems today. I don't have a chalkboard. For those of you under 50, a chalkboard's a piece of thing that you write on that's black on the front of the board, and you erase. You may have to explain a lot of the stories here as we go along. But the title for today is Keeping It Real. We live in an artificial world. We have artificial food. We have artificial sweetener. We now have artificial fat. You can eat an entire meal and have nothing that's food. My son was telling me the other day they had a mouse in their pantry, and they were catching, and they realized he ate everything but the Pop-Tarts. One smart rat, he knows that's not food. And yet, we eat that kind of stuff. And we fill ourselves in an artificial world. We have reality TV shows. Now, that's the real oxymoron that we live, that this is not real. Like somebody says, "Why doesn't the cameraman rescue the guy who's standing there drowning or whatever?" But this is the whole artificial world that we live in. So to work on that a little bit today is, I got 3 puzzles. And the first one's real easy. The second one is not so easy. And the third one is number 3. So, this one is for pretty much anybody can do. What's wrong with this picture? Remember we used to play all these games with it? See how many items you can count that you can see that are wrong. And like I said, if you need pencil paper, that's fine. Got a good memory. What's wrong with this picture? How many found more than 5 already? Okay. How many found more than 10 already? 1. How many found more than 12 already? All right, let's see what we got here. Okay. Probably missed a few. This requires you to know a little bit of stuff that most elementary kids, a lot of preschoolers know, that there's some things that just aren't really real in here. We don't have pigs doing the Nat King Cole thing, and all that kind of stuff. But that's just a fun little game that we remember playing a lot. That's what's wrong. Now, that was number 1, easy warm-up. Let's do number 2. All right, what's wrong with this picture? There are 16 items in this picture that are mistakes. I'm going to give you a little bit bigger one here in a minute to look at. You're looking for 16 items. So here you might need your pencil paper. How many found more than 5 so far? The 1, 2, 2. Come on, folks, let's wake up. We started you easy. All right, that's part of the problem. That's what makes it tougher. That's where people in the front row have a little advantage. The people with good vision has a little extra advantage with it. How many found 5 so far? Okay, a few more. Anybody found 10? Let me give you some hints here. Look and see now that we're pointing at some things. Does that give you some clues? Now that I point, can you see where the differences come? You see, to play this game, we require 3 things. First thing we need to know is what is the correct thing it's supposed to be. What is supposed to be there? Number 2, when you look at it, you can see that there's something wrong with it. And number 3, you can decide how much variation is going to be allowed in this situation. Is this artistic license? Is this the way they just simplified it? Or is there something fundamentally wrong with it? So, you have to know what's there, see what you know is supposed to be there, see what is actually there, and then be able to make a judgment as to how much variation you can allow. Okay. Does that help when I point at little parts of the picture to help to see what goes on? Okay. How many people follow what all the arrows were now? What mistakes are they pointing at? Okay. All right, let's look at the list real quick. And we'll come back and look at these again. The word "the" is misspelled up on the top, and the cent sign's in the wrong place. The megaphone's being used backwards. You got 2 flags blowing in opposite directions. Never been in a hurricane down here, so they may not. The peddler has a sign up that says bananas that you probably couldn't see, but he's selling apples. And if you notice the stripes on the man's pants do not run, one runs up and down and one runs sideways. And the apple peddler has a half a mustache and a few other things here. So let's go back and kind of look here and see the kind of things we've got that we know what's supposed to be there. Now, one of the things that we had was if you notice the little balloon off to the side, there's no string going down to it. Okay? What we tend to do is we tend to put things in. We know there ought to be a string there, our eye just sees one. If you look at the on the sign that says the big show, if you ever have to do proofreading much, you'll find most of the mistakes are going to be in the captions to pictures and in the headlines. People don't proof those. You don't see those. You know what the word was supposed to be, so you just assume that that's what it is. This is why if you're proofreading, you can never proofread your own work, because you know what you meant, no matter what got down on the paper. So it gets to be the thing of being able to see what is actually there. So can you really see what's wrong with the thing? Now, the next puzzle we have is going to take some background to work through, a little bit of review. King David built a great empire. He won lots and lots of battles and got people, captured a lot of countries around him. His son, King Solomon, took over and was a wise ruler and did a lot of wheeling and dealing with all the countries around him. One of the ways he made negotiations work was to marry the princesses of these various countries. So he had lots and lots of wives, and the wives came with their own religions. So Solomon then, to make everybody happy, built a lot of temples and actually worshipped in some of them for all the various gods. So God had blessed David and promised him a kingdom, but he was not happy with Solomon because Solomon had worshipped other gods and had supported other religions. So Solomon then came up with, God then said he did not listen. And so when his son Rehoboam, Solomon's son Rehoboam, took over the throne, there was a young man over in Egypt named Jeroboam who had been one of Solomon's upper level leaders in charge of things, and a prophet had come to him and given him this prophecy. And the prophet came to and said, Jeroboam, he said, Solomon has messed up bad, and so I'm going to give you a kingdom. Okay? I'm going to give you the king, become the king of Israel. And so what the prophet says to him is, however is for you, I will take you, and you'll rule over all that your heart desires. You'll be king over Israel. If you do whatever I command you, and walk in obedience to me, and do what is right in my eyes by obeying my decrees and commands, as David my servant did, I will be with you, and I will build you a dynasty as enduring as the one I built for David, and will give Israel to you. Okay? This is what he was promised. The prophet met him in a private place, took his cloak, tore it in 12 pieces, gave Jeroboam 10 of them. He says, you've got 10 of the 12 tribes, and you have a dynasty. See, this is an interesting thing that some people think that grace was invented in the New Testament. Here's an Old Testament example. Jeroboam was not part of any particular group of people. Edomite, the son of a widow, no big political connections. He was a bright, good leader. But God says, I'm choosing you to be head and king, and I will give you a dynasty. But God says, I promised David that he would be king of the country, and his descendants would. I didn't tell him how much of a country they would be king of. So they get Jerusalem and the surrounding area. Now, notice that the kingdom here had shrunk a bit. All right. All the technicians went to the rescue here, but we'll ad-lib a little bit. The first map we went through, Solomon controlled a major part of that area. Basically everything from Egypt to Syria. So we see the reign of Solomon here was the big yellow section, which is everything from Egypt all the way up through Syria. The last few years of Solomon's rule, things started collapsing. All these little countries went into rebellion in different ways, so he had lots of problems. When the kingdom divided, it was a much smaller kind of area. So, now a quick geography lesson of what we've got. The northernmost city in Israel is Dan, up at where the Jordan begins. amazingly different place from all the rest of Israel, which normally think of in desert country. That area up there looks like the Smoky Mountains. It is totally lush, watered, solid greenery all over the place. Further south you go, the drier it gets. So, Dan was the northernmost country. The southern border of Israel, a place called Beersheba, Bethel. Okay. Bethel is, Beth means house, El means God. Anything that ends in El means something to do with God. And Beth means house. So Bethlehem, the house of wheat. So here's this little town here, and so you just need this geography. A little aside, you'll often see in the Old Testament, they talk about from Dan to Beersheba. If you look at the very bottom of the blue area there, you see the little town of Beersheba out in the desert. They say Dan to Beersheba, they mean the entire country. That's just another way of saying all of Israel when you see that in there. So, Jeroboam, the country's divided, and they just barely avoided a civil war. They got two countries going. Now, we go to the rest of the story in 1 Kings 13. Jeroboam thought to himself, the kingdom will now likely revert to the house of David. These people go up to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem. They will again give their allegiance to their Lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam. After seeking the advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. One he set up in Bethel and the other in Dan. This thing became a sin. The people came to worship one at Bethel and went as far as Dan to worship the other. Jeroboam built shrines on high places and appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they were not Levites. He instituted a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival held in Judah, and offered sacrifices on the altar. This he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made. And at Bethel he also installed priests at the high places he made. On the 15th day of the 8th month, a month of his own choosing, he offered sacrifices on the altar he built at Bethel. So he instituted the festivals for the Israelites and went up to the altar to make offerings. Now, we've played a few games with looking at funny pictures and figuring out what's wrong. I told you this is number 3, and it gets hard. What's wrong with this picture?
Sacrificing to calves.
Okay. Make a list. There's a lot wrong. Like the other one. Start your list. How many things can you see wrong out of these 2 verses? This passage right here. What's going on wrong?
God put Jeroboam on that throne, and now he is God to help him.
Okay, that he put him up there, he promised him a dynasty with one condition. And he said, all you got to do is follow directions. Does this sound familiar? You ever told your kids that? All you got to just follow directions. So, that's all. And the time came, this is what God promised, and he says, I think I got a better idea. So let's take a look here and see what we got. Now, how many people have ever heard this expression? It walks like a duck, quacks, swims like a duck, quacks like a duck. Well, it's a duck. How many people have heard that before? Are the lights still on out there? All right. How many people believe it? Okay, this is the test, believe it. Thumbs up mean I really believe it. Thumbs down, I mean I don't believe it. This is called wiggle waggle, means I'm not sure. This means I have no idea what the question means. All right, do you believe it or don't believe it? I see a wiggle waggle. Paul, what are you voting? Come. You got thumbs up, thumbs down, wiggle waggle. That's your choice. All right. All right. I got an up. I got a wiggle. I got 2 ups. I got a. Okay. I got a lot of people getting squishy here on me. The people that have been in my classes before, they know I've been accused of asking trick questions. So, let's do the duck test on Jeroboam. The duck test is a good test. Let's see how it works. You got to have a temple. Hey, you got a temple. You got to have priests. We got priests. You got to have sacrifices. We got sacrifices. You got to have festivals. We got festivals. 4 out of 4 means I get 100, right? Sounds good to me. So what's wrong? What happened here? We passed the test, and yet there was something wrong. So let's take a look and see. In fact, let me go back and let you ponder a minute. What went wrong here? How many people can see more than 5 things? Yeah, what's wrong with the picture? We checked the duck test. I got 4 out of 4. We got temple, we got priests, we got sacrifices, we got festivals. What's the problem? We got all the pieces. What's the problem?
Wrong leadership.
All right. Let me go through a couple more things before we give the answer. This is a picture of Jeroboam's temple at Dan. And obviously the metal altar area is a restored thing. They didn't have aluminum back then. And it's here, and this is me talking to the tour group that we did there, basically doing this lesson. So I figured it was a good enough lesson to slightly rewarm and bring back here with a fancy slideshow. And we're talking to a bunch of people. A lot of them were ministers in different places. So let's take a look here. And I may have missed a few, like I did with the little pictures and my arrows. What went wrong here? He says, first thing in red, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Now I have heard that the translation from the Hebrew for this is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. Now, I'm not sure that's good Hebrew, but I'll have to ask Chris when he gets back and see what it really is. You know, you've got a problem and I'm here to help you. If you went back to the first paragraph, somebody's got a problem, but it's not the people. Now, he set up a temple in Bethel and one in Dan. What's the problem? Where's the temple supposed to be?
Jerusalem.
All right. Now, how about the next red line? These are the gods who brought you up out of Egypt. Why he didn't get zapped right then, I don't know. So, what he did, he took his golden calves, gave them the name of God, and said what God did, these people did. I think some of you are putting some pieces together ahead of me, but well, hang on to it a minute. Okay. What's the problem up here with the priests? They're not Levites. God said priests come from the tribe of Levi. Jeroboam says, you want to be a priest? Be a priest, whatever. And what's the problem with the calves? He made them. They're his own creation. He built it and then worshipped it. He created his own high places. We had special holidays. Where'd they come from? He made them up. You got to have holidays. You got to have festivals. You know. October 17th sounds like a good festival day. Let's have one. And he got up and did the offerings himself, which was, again, only the priest could do. So it's what happens when you give up the promises and go on the fears. He was afraid, even though God had made him the promise. So whether you live in promise or live in fear, makes the difference. Jeroboam was offered a dynasty with ruling Israel, as powerful, respected, and well-known as King David would have been. But he said, people might kill me. So I need to get a better idea. So basically what I referred to this with these guys, I said what Jeroboam had was caffeine-free Diet Coke. You know, it looks like regular Coke. It's in the same size can. It's got the same corporate logo on it, made by the same company. You pour it in a glass, it looks the same. It simply has no sugar and no caffeine. So you get no energy boost and you get no caffeine boost. What you've got is fizzy-colored water. But it has no real ingredients in it. So this became kind of the thing was, and the tour group kind of got into this of kind of the caffeine-free Diet Coke. It helped them remember it looked like everything else, but there's nothing there. So the problem we're facing today is how do we keep it real? How do we get down to a real world? And there's lots of ways people do it. Okay? The Jewish people have the mezuzah. And in all the Jewish hotels we were in, and most of the Jewish businesses, at every doorway was a little mezuzah. It's a little box about this big that has a scripture in it. And come in different sizes, shapes. The one over there on the right is in white has got a little schwa on it, which is the hero of Israel, the Lord our God is one. And so that's kind of the prayer they say, and the Orthodox people would touch that every time they went out to remind themselves, this is who God is. It's like a little tune-up. This is who God is. And watching some people in some of the businesses they go through, and every time they went through a door in the workshop, they'd reach up and touch them. Just an automatic kind of thing. The Muslims they pray to Mecca. When we checked into a hotel in Jericho, totally Muslim country, in the room was a little green circle with an arrow on it. It took a while to translate the strange spelling on Mecca, but realized that that's to point the correct direction to Mecca. So they know where their center is. Also, outside every mosque, there are big loudspeakers. Big, loud speakers. And in the mornings and evening, they do morning prayers. Long, loud morning prayers. Well, one evening we were trying to do a Devo out there, and they started off, and I think there were 3 different mosques, all slightly out of tune, with the hills echoing off the side. I finally decided silent prayer would be the only way we're going with this. So that's part of the thing, is morning and evening, they have long prayers, and kind of like church bells ring for us, that's kind of the thing. To keep tuned in, what is their center of where they're at? Some people wear special clothing. Some people wear special symbols on their clothing. You know, there are groups that wear, special kinds of underwear. They get up in the morning and they know who they are. They're tuned in, they're centered because of what they put on. Some people wear a cross, carry jewelry, something special in their pocket. Some people do the daily Bible reading, a prayer time. A few years ago, the fad of what would Jesus do bracelets kind of came. What do you do to keep tuned in? How do you keep working here? So, I want to give you another way to do that. Take a look at these signs. Dix is a coat collector, so we took all kinds of pictures of Coke cans and signs and stuff. Now, you probably can't read anything on those storefronts, but you know what's sold there. Okay? The Hebrew's not, but Coke, I think, is number one or number two of the internationally recognized symbols in the world. It's every place. So I want you to hang on to that, because every time you see a Coke sign, I want you to ask this question. Am I just caffeine-free Diet Coke? All fizz and no substance. You see, you're going to see a Coke sign 5, 6, 7 times a day, almost no matter where you are, unless you're so far out in the woods, and you'll probably find it in somebody's, someplace out there. You're going to see this, and this can become your question. Am I just caffeine-free Diet Coke? See, one of the things I'm trying to do is give people something very short and very simple to hang on to. What will give you the remembrance each time? What will trigger where you're at? What can I leave you with that's going to be one very simple lesson to keep coming back to that you don't forget? So, this may be too fuzzy of a question, or too fizzy of a question for you to deal with. So, if it is, I want to give you 3 more questions to help keep it real. Kind of maybe flesh out the caffeine-free Diet Coke kind of thing. And here are the questions. And they're not hard questions because they all start with W. Okay? Which most questions do. Here are your questions. You got 3 questions. If not now, when? If not here, where? And my last question that didn't make it is really the most one. If not me, who? You got 3 questions to come up with. If not now, when? If not here, where? If not me, who? That's the question. And that's triggered every time you see a Coca-Cola sign. What are you doing? What are you? Are you just fizz? And what's going to happen? Where, when, and who? Those are your 3 questions. Where, when, and who? Take the questions.